Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Brian. Today's project, we're working on our 2007 GMC Acadia. Apparently the air conditioning does not work, and for a 17-year-old driver that is not an option. In the summer in North Carolina, I charged it twice last year. First time it worked, and about a week later lost it. Looked like the Schrader valves were leaking, so I replaced them, recharged it, and we got about another week of performance. By that time it was the fall, and we deferred to spring. Now spring has come, and we need to see if we can figure out what's wrong with this AC. To start with, we can go ahead and hook up the gauges, see if there's any refrigerant in it. I kind of suspect there is none. So we got a little bit of something in there, but I guarantee we start the car, the compressor's not going to do anything. So we've got a couple options. I've got a UV light. Apparently this system came with factory dye in the refrigerant, so we can go around with that and look for leaks, which I've kind of already done. And I also bought a leak detector, some of Amazon's finest right here. I'll put a link for it down there in case you're interested. I've kind of tested it, waved it around, unhooked this gauge. So it's got to be right on whatever to detect anything. So I've looked around with the UV light. You should be able to see some kind of glowing wherever there might have been Freon. Well, I guess technically it's R134A leaking, or the oil that accompanies it. The only place I've seen anything thus far, if we go in here to the bottom of the AC compressor, I'm not sure that's even going to show up. You can see a little bit of dye right there. Right there. I don't want to condemn the whole compressor just based on that, so I think what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of refrigerant to it and then try to sniff around and see if we can find anything. So that little bit of pressure is actually probably compressed air. I pressurized it a few weeks ago, see if I could see anything blatantly blowing out, which I didn't. So I think what we'll go ahead and do, got my vacuum pump. Got my vacuum pump hooked up here. We'll go ahead and pull out whatever's in there out of it, and then we'll hit it with some refrigerant, and then we'll go around with the leak detector. Typically when you charge a system, you pull it down as much as you can in the negative vacuum territory. When I worked on this last year, it would hold a vacuum for like an hour, so I assumed there were no leaks. Sometimes they don't leak under vacuum, they don't leak under pressure, but we'll let this sit here for a few minutes and see what happens to that number. We're about 28. We've been sitting for at least 30 minutes and really haven't lost any vacuum that I can discern. So we'll put some refrigerant in it, see if we can figure out where the leak is. I got chastised last time for not letting some refrigerant come out of here to purge the yellow hose. So in theory, you should be able to open the low side connection, and this can should discharge all of its contents into the low side of the system. I've never had much luck doing this, so here in a minute we're probably going to have to start it and turn the compressor on. That can's really cold, so sometimes if you hold your hands around it, the heat from your hands will help push some more gas out of it. Just in the meantime, there the compressor came on, so now it should pull some more out. So build enough pressure to start the compressor. Now we can get the old handy tool and start sniffing around. Nothing yet if this thing even works. We'll let it try to get this whole can in there, and then we'll shut it off and sniff around. So I've been shut off for a few minutes, been sniffing around with the sniffing tool. The intensity doesn't seem to make any difference, and I've also been using the UV light. So I finally got down under here into compressor, which I suspected anyway, and looked around. Looks remarkably good, but once I shove this bad boy in here, it goes berserk right there. So I'm assuming that's where a problem is. So up here at the front of the compressor, front of the vehicle, there's definitely something leaking up there. It's almost like once it alerts, it needs to get its stuff back together. So let me turn it off. Turn it back on. So anyway, I hope you caught that. It alerted up there at the front of the compressor where the connections are, and that was this dying gasp. She hadn't worked since, so Jeff Bezos may be getting this thing back. So down there's the compressor buried under the alternator. We all know how much fun that is to get out. So I suspect that the leak is somewhere on top where maybe the connections bolt on, and maybe it's just O-rings leaking. I couldn't see anything with the UV light and the detector. She gave up the ghost already, so we're going to be sending this thing back. Maybe it's too much work on the first day. So let me do some research, figure out what I need to do, but I suspect I can probably just pull that clean it real well, pull that manifold off and replace the O-rings. That'd be the cheap way to start anyway. So I purchased another leak detector. See if this one survives a little better. My leak on the other one showed up down here around the compressor, but more than likely what charge was in there, oh, there it's gone. It's detecting something. This one also has a fancy little flashlight attached to it with a blue light and a regular flashlight. So I'll link this one in the description since it's actually worked more than 5 minutes. I think what we're going to do, based on all the oil, etc. around there, is I'm going to take the pressure washer and I'm going to try to got a little Mustang maintenance going on here too. Try to clean up around where those pressure lines bolt on, so we don't introduce a bunch of dirt into the compressor, because both those are going to have to come off, and I'm hoping we can get it from up here and not have to go down below or pull the compressor off. So we'll fire up the pressure washer and get that cleaned off. So I took the blowgun and blew compressed air down there and tried to dry it out as best I could. Looks pretty dry. And all the rest of the refrigerant that's in there, what little bit there was, it's no longer there. So this hose is held on right there with what appears to be a 13 millimeter, and same with this one under this wire. So I'm going to go in there with a long extension and a flex socket and see if I can break those loose. I probably can on that one. Let's see what I need to do different. I don't know that I can get the angle on this bottom one. I'm going to unbolt those, pull them off, and see what kind of O-rings live behind there. Pretty sure
you won't be able to see any of that. So I'll just pull them off and let you know the results. I was able to fish this, I guess this will be the low side line, up out of there after I got the bolts out. This has an O-ring, which is kind of aluminum on the outside and rubber on the inside. So I made a trip to my local O'Reilly's. They sell this kit, which says it's vehicle specific. I'm assuming I got one of the right ones in there. So with that kit, 3 cans of refrigerant. This will take slightly more than 3 cans, but I have a partial can, so I'm hoping that'll make it. We're like $57, and I did apply my veterans discount and get 10% off that. So let's see. Pretty sure that's going to fit. I believe that's our animal right there. There's enough oil already on there. I'm just going to leave it like it is. I was able to pull the high side line up this far. It has a similar O-ring on it. Pretty sure there's one of them in there too. I'm going to say that's it. So now I just need to pop them back in their respective holes and bolt them down, which of course, there's no way you're going to see that, but trust me, it's down there. The bolts are in. I'm sure there's a torque spec for this. I don't know what that is, and I really couldn't find it, so click. Should be good. The one on the bottom's a little tricky, just because of the angle. Click. Let's hope it was that easy. Got this vacuum pump a few years ago, of course from Amazon. And honestly, it works really pretty well. I can't complain about it, and it was fairly cheap. If I did this professionally, a better one would probably be in order, but this does a good enough job. Still have the gauges hooked up. Pull this vent off. Slowly open both sides. So this has been pulling a vacuum for maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes it's a good sanity check. You can go ahead and close it off. Shut it off. We'll give that a couple minutes. And if it rapidly loses the vacuum, then we've got another problem. But if it holds that for a little while, then we're probably all right. And in this case, it's rapidly losing, so something's crazy going on. Let me make sure all my shit's tight. So when you rapidly lose a vacuum like that, make sure your low side connection is not laying over in the fender well. Let me reconnect that. Turn it back on. Try this again. Shut these off. Shut off the vacuum pump. Give that a minute or two and see if we see any movement. So it's been a few minutes and we're holding steady, so I think we're good. We'll let this vacuum pump eat on this a little while longer. So this vacuum pump's been doing its best Monica Lewinsky for about an hour, hour and a half. So we're going to shut it off and then we'll make sure the vacuum, we hold our vacuum for a little bit and then we'll charge the system. So this has probably sat a good 45 minutes and it's held the vacuum. So now we got 3 cans of refrigerant, 134A and a piece, which should fill our system completely. I'm going to start with this piece of can. So I'm almost full, and I noticed I had one of these cans that I could not get to give up any refrigerant. And there's like a sweet spot with the valve. You have to get it just right before it'll discharge anything. So you almost have to just listen to it. I had 2 cans that were like that. The other one's pretty pain-free. I mean, there's a little bit left in there, but you're never gonna get that out. This one's still taking it. In the car, I have a temperature probe in the center dash vent. So we're getting 51, 50 degree air. Can't ask for much more than that. Right there's a sweet spot. I'm getting the rest out of the rest of these cans. I mean, it's just a minute amount, but I need it all. So I imagine if I revved it up, it'd get a little colder than that, but that's plenty good. So I shut it off, kind of let the pressures equalize, turned everything off. Let's pull the valves off. I was able to get all these cans empty by using the ear method. They're a little finicky. Anyway, it should be fully charged. It's blowing cold air. Hopefully that stops everything from the complaints department. So we'll give it one last little sniff with the old sniff detector here. So that thing really lit up before, so I think problem solved. I'll link these products down in the description, at least the worthwhile ones. Wah, wah, wah. So it's a few weeks later, and air conditioning's not working again. And the charge lasted longer than it did in the past, so let's keep looking. So I've already checked down here and everything's good there. So I went to the next obvious place, which would be the air conditioning condenser, which lives in front of the radiator. Which kind of, when I started down this path originally, I kind of expected that's where the leak to be. I pulled the panel off that sits here, and one of the clips is actually pulled out of the grill, so I'm able to tilt it to the side. So there's a couple wet spots right there on the condenser and down at that corner. The trusty blue light. You can see the dye. You can really see it down there at the bottom. So let's replace the condenser. The new condenser, prices are all over the place, from like $60 on Amazon and eBay to $250, $275 at your parts store. I went somewhere in the middle. This says it's a genuine GM parts condenser, and it was like $130. In order to get in there, this bumper cover needs to come off. I probably need to go back and watch some of my own videos to see how to get it off. But as I recall, there's screws in the wheel well, some plastic rivets underneath. Couple, I believe there are 7mm screws up here, and then it'll pop off. I think all you have to unplug is the fog lights. So in an ideal world, you would take this and have what little bit of refrigerant was in here recovered. We'll just pretend that happened. There's a 13mm bolt right here, which is kind of nice because that's the only fluid connection we have to worry about. And it looks as though these little tabs will squeeze together, one on each side. Push this little wind deflector out of the way, and it should lift up. There we go. You can probably see oil marks, etc. Yeah, she don't look good on the back either. Oh, it's really bad right there. Let's make sure we're the same, which I believe we are. Now there is one difference. This one takes a nut, where the other one has a bolt, so I'll just have to find a nut to go on there. It should just drop in. If your radiator was filthy, that would be a good time to clean it out, but since I replaced that a few years ago, it looks pretty good. Over on the driver's side, it just drops into a slot right there. Then on the passenger side, there's a little cup that it fits in. Fluid connection uses the same metallized kind of O-rings. So I guess this kit's going to pay off a little more. Looks like that. That looks like that. So I've selected the correct O-rings, and I still had some PAG oil, which is what the oil in this takes. Just lubricate those O-rings with a little bit of that. Stick them on. Now I need to locate a nut. I was able to locate a washer that's suitable and an M8 nut. Again, there's probably a torque spec for this. We'll just call it snug. I'm going to go ahead and replace the Schrader valve down on the low side port just because I have a whole assortment and we have it apart. All right, here goes. So we'll recharge this again. I won't bore you with all those details, but we'll give it a recharge, and I'm gonna put the front bumper back on after we charge it, just in case we see some visible sign of leak. So we're in there, we're all charged up, we're blowing cold again. Don't see any obvious signs of any oil or anything escaping. Neighbor's got the pressure washer out, so I will go ahead and stick this front bumper cover back on, which really, it just kind of clips into here, and then this clips into it. Then there's some screws, and there's a couple screws across the bottom. We're all back together, and the pressure washer is really going now, so I'll try to make this quick. So if you have an old Acadia and the AC is losing its charge, look for those items. replaced O-rings here, which were a pretty easy job, and actually the condenser was a pretty easy job too. And as I said, I'll put the links in the description for where I found these parts. And I would imagine this applies to other years too. The 07 is the first year of this car, so I'm sure any of them that look like this would be the same procedure, and probably the later ones too. Thanks for watching, we'll see you soon.